Welcome to This Week in Hastings Headline History, where we take a look back at what was making news in Hastings, Florida over a century ago. These stories are out of the pages of the Hastings Herald, which was published weekly in the early 1900s. Sit back and enjoy as this week I'll fill you in on what was making news in the July 11th, 1919 edition. Dredge work in Deep Creek begins shortly. Mayor Burt has received maps and bulletins from the War Department, giving the full details that will be carried out on the Deep Creek dredging and the way the government engineers are planning to do the work. 2 points are to be cut off, and he is requested to get deeds to the land that will be cut by the dredge, which is only a small part of an acre. The dredging work will cut the channel much larger, remove all sandbars, snag the banks, and take all obstruction from the channel up this way as far as the railroad bridge. In this work, with the huge steam engines that will be employed in this heavy digging that must be accomplished, the government is asking for bids on supplying the wood needed by the dredges. They will require about 100 cords per month to be delivered to the creek banks so that the lighters may be able to reach it. Anyone desiring to bid on the wood order will secure specifications from the engineering department at Jacksonville. The result will mean much for the development of the Hastings section. An unwanted dip. Ray Hellier has had to stand a good deal of teasing because of an unexpected dip that he took in the St. Johns River recently. It seems that Mr. Hellier, with a party which included E. Noble Calhoun and Ray L. Hendricks, went fishing at Tucoy a few days ago. Mr. Hellier, while propping himself restfully against the railing of the dock on which the party elected to angle, discovered that time had gotten in its good work on the wooden supports, for he found himself precipitated into the blue waters of the St. Johns, thus receiving an unexpected dunking. The fish in the vicinity were badly frightened, but otherwise no harm was done, as Mr. Hellier is quite at home in the water and had no trouble in rescuing himself from the big pool into which he had dived. Marion Hotel will undergo extensive changes. Deciding on a stride that will place the Marion Hotel abreast the other big hostelries on the bayfront, Mr. and Mrs. Henry Muller have given the contract to E.J. Masters for extensive improvements. The entire structure will be veneered with stucco that will add immensely to its attractive appearance, and at the same time will make it semi-fireproof. The plans provide for the removal of the porches on all of the upper floors, but porches on the lower floor will remain and will be widened 4 feet greater than their present width. Sun parlors and enclosed porches will offer delightful lounging places to the guests where they may rest or play cards in comfort on rainy or cold days indifferent to the elements. A tower will be erected on the southeast corner matching up with the one on the north side, and the lower room of this will form a sun parlor. It will be enclosed with glass and will be located to catch the sun the greater part of the day. The tower on the upper floors will contain rooms. 6 new bathrooms have already been installed and 6 more are provided for in the contract. They will be finished with porcelain tiling and will give sufficient private baths to meet the demand for the next year or two. About 50 rooms in the Marion will be equipped with private baths next winter. A novel experience. An exceedingly novel experience for a visiting girl was enjoyed by Miss Harriet Pelfer of Centralia, Illinois, one evening this week, when Miss Pelfer and Miss Florence Davis, whose guest she is, were with a party of young folks motoring on the beach. These moonlight nights are of course popular with the crowds who enjoy turtle egg hunting, and this particular party succeeded in locating a nest. They were also fortunate enough to find the turtle proceeding down toward the water. Intercepting the great creature and delaying its return to the briny, the girls took turns in enjoying a ride on its broad back. This incident was so unusual, even for the house girls, that the visitor is delighted over having had a share in this experience. International Exposition will soon be launched. At the recent session of the legislature, a bill was passed creating a commission to be known as the Florida Centennial Commission, whose duty it will be to direct the proposed International Exposition commemorating the purchase of Florida from Spain by the United States government. A meeting of the commission has been called for July 15th in Jacksonville at the Windsor Hotel to begin preliminary arrangements for the big exposition. The legislature provided $10,000 for the expenses of the commission. As yet, the question of a location for the exposition is open, While St. Augustine would be the proper place from a historical viewpoint, the city is too small to undertake such a mammoth task and will make no bid for it. It must be held in one of the largest and wealthiest cities of the state, and then one that has the advantage of a convenient location for tourists. Sawmill Going Up. The framework is up for the sawmill at the new lumber company that has recently opened up near Deep Creek at the location of the old S&A Lumber Co. The location that has been selected for the building site is in the rear of the locomotive repair shops, near the brick road. At the rate the work is being turned out at the present time, the mill will be in operation in the next 30 or 60 days. Move to develop island arouses much interest. Much favorable comment has been heard over the action of the county commissioners in appointing a committee to create a road and bridge district for New Augustine, St. Augustine, and Anastasia Island, and the hope has been freely expressed that this step will crystallize into a free bridge to the island. Businessmen and citizens generally seem to favor a free bridge across the bay, but there is a diversity of views as to where it should be located. Some favor erecting a bridge several blocks south of the present structure, where the tide currents are not so swift, and they also favor an ornamental bridge that will be pleasing to the eye and one much wider than the present bridge. Others are in favor of acquiring the South Beach Bridge, as this would involve less expense than building, but there seems to be no adverse sentiment to the free bridge proposition. From the editorial section, the patriotism of thrift. Either you are for or you are not for the continued stability and prosperity that is the independence of the United States. To be neutral is to rob your country of your support and automatically to throw your weight onto the other scale. A great many of us have never known what real independence is. We have been bound by a lack of funds to the daily grind. The war, with its stringent demand for saving, first taught us that it is possible to put a little aside from what we would ordinarily consume. We know that if we steadily place a part of our earnings in safe investment, such as the war account in the form of government securities, we will be shaping a lever with which to raise ourselves out of our rut onto the solid road of progress. Money saved, whether loaned to the government or otherwise invested, finds its way back into needed industry and enterprise. Money spent wastefully increases the loose circulation, which hampers the production of necessities and comforts. The Hastings Herald had more than stories you'd find in modern newspapers. They also had local notices that were more of a social report, a way to know what was going on in town and in the personal lives of its residents. Here are a few from this edition. To New Smyrna. G.W. Johnson and family will leave next Friday for New Smyrna, where they will spend about 3 weeks on vacation. While there, he will look out for a location for a home. Home from school. Chaz Humphreys, who has been attending the summer course at the State University, returned home last Friday and spent the 4th of July in the best little town on the East Coast. He is getting along nicely with his work at school and likes it fine. Back from overseas. Toots Brown of Federal Point has returned from overseas and is being heartily greeted by his numerous friends in this section. He reached home Wednesday. And finally, Wanted. If you wish a pretty and wealthy wife, write me. Stamped envelope for reply. Lillian Sprout, Station H, Cleveland, Ohio. I hope you enjoyed this week's edition of Hastings Headline History. Our theme music this week was the 1919 recording of Dardanella by Ben Selvins Novelty Orchestra. This podcast was brought to you by Presenting the Past, bringing history back to the present through historic presentations and the sale of treasures from days gone by. This episode was written and produced by me, Michelle Murillo, with the aid of vintage copies of the Hastings Herald. And to wrap up this week in Hastings Headline History, how about a tune from the time, a 1919 hit? This week's song is Anything Is Nice If It Comes From Dixieland by Bert Harvey.
Every winter you will notice that the ladies in the sky to the south will always fly. Now perhaps you're wondering why. It's the land of sunshine and the only place a real wise bird should be. There's a lot of good things waiting make our clothes, the cotton grows in dear old Alabama. Each hungry mouth looks to the south for sweet Virginia ham. From Tennessee comes melody that's played by every band. And if you're talking of chicken, oh Maryland, Louisiana sugar is sweeter than the road. Just thank old Carolina, that's where Bull Durham grows. If you're dreaming of a girl to love, that's the place to win her hand. Take my advice, anything is nice if it comes from Dixieland. Dixie, Dixie is a garden far away from snow and ice. It's a perfect paradise and the home of everything nice. Everybody loves it, cause they know about its many different charms. Like a mother, she will welcome you with open arms. Just to make our clothes, the cotton grows in dear old Alabama. Each hungry mouth looks to the south for sweet Virginia ham. From Tennessee comes melody that's played by every band. And if you're talking of chicken, oh Maryland, Louisiana sugar is sweeter than the road. Just thank old Carolina, that's where Bull Durham grows. If you're dreaming of a girl to love, that's the place to win her hand. Take my advice, everything is nice if it comes